everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Planetarian for Steam Part 13. Today we continue our chat with Yumemi in the rain. Think about it until I come back. Arming my grenade launcher, I slowly stood up.
Hai, wakarimashita.
She said clearly.
言ってくれ。
I'm off.
はい、お帰りをお待ちしています。
もう一度言うが、何があっても動くな、声も上げるな。俺が戻ってくるまでだぞ。
I'm saying this again, but no matter what happens, don't move and don't speak. Not until I return.
俺の命が大切だと思ってくれるならな。
That is, if you believe that my life is important.
はい、お客様が戻ってくるまで、ここから移動せず、声も出しません。重要命令として登録しました。
She smiled sweetly and then closed her mouth. Her figure, which should have looked the same as ever to me, instead looked somehow forlorn as it was enwrapped in the rain.
そうだ。こいつを預かってくれ。
Oh yes, keep this for me. I undid the bouquet from the straps of my backpack and tossed it over to her. This thing, which had been handcrafted with care, was already breaking down. But if at least its pattern was not salvageable by the time the battle was over, then there would be no point in my having carried it this far.
はい、大切にお預かりしておきます。
She said, the bouquet in her arms. And that smile like a little star graced her face forever. I weaved through the alleyways, coming to the edge of the buffer zone. I found a 6-story building whose windows had all been broken, and I walked up its floors. The place was completely pillaged, perhaps by the hand of another junker. I entered a room at the top floor and took up position at a waterlogged window. The Fiddler Crab was still standing motionless at the rift in the quarantine wall, as if it were a simple watchdog. From here, I could easily see the gun turret, glinting dully in the rain. If it would stay fixed, then it would not be unhittable. At the same time, that meant that I was also within range of those machine guns. The only consolation was that I was in a position well short of minimal allowable range of the railgun. I cracked open the barrel of my grenade launcher. I inserted another cartridge. I had chosen a composite armor-piercing directed blast ACDHESH grenade set with a 10-meter proximity fuse. This would be able to penetrate the armor of the main cannon, no matter which angle it struck at. But once I fired, I would most definitely be detected. Although I had 2 more AP cartridges left, I did not think it was likely that I would have a second chance if I did not manage to disable the Fiddler Crab with my first shot. I closed and cocked the grenade launcher and then raised the long-distance sight. I calculated the distance to my target and the ballistic subsidence rate, and corrected my aim accordingly. This grenade launcher was equipped with neither tracer functionality nor a ballistic stabilizer. The stopping power of the cartridges and the construction of the gun stock itself were unchanged from designs of last century. After all, the simpler an armament was, the easier it was to trust it. That was the only rule of social discourse that the unceasing rain had imparted to me. I lowered my head and braced the gun barrel against the window frame and carefully adjusted my aim. The rain was continuing to fall. The wind was intermittently and weakly blowing from left to right across the buffer zone. There was still no indication of movement from my target. The wind kicked up. The muddy water to one side began to ripple like the scales of a fish. I waited for the wind to die down, my fingers still tense on the trigger. And I suddenly realized that I was thirsty. Not even the first time when I fought a warmonger so long ago had I felt so nervous. Before I could wonder why, I found myself thinking about her. She was probably standing stock still in the middle of that soaked sidewalk right around now, in accordance with my order. Even though I had brought her along with me, I had still not thought of what I was going to do with her. It was just that I could picture what would happen to her if other junkers happened upon her later and harvested her. A charging apparatus would be expensive, but not so much that I could never procure it. While it would be difficult to update her software or replace her parts, I could probably at least do some maintenance and minor adjustments for her. For that matter, it might even be possible to procure a small projector for her. Of course, an umbrella-like device with a hemispheric spread would also be necessary for the projection. With those two things, we could travel from settlement to settlement, and with our commentary, we could show the people the starry sky. What if I changed my profession? We might even be able to reach every place where people still live by the time I die. And in any case, I was sick and tired of being a junker as well. How stupid. I murmured as I realigned my aim, which had by this point slanted totally askew. That was all just a pipe dream. I must have slipped off into those thoughts because my mind was clouded with fear. They were all just proof that I was starting to think that I couldn't die here. These thoughts didn't feel that bad, though. The wind weakened and finally died down like the last faint breaths of a dying old man. The Fiddler Crab was still aiming its main cannon out the rift in the wall, waiting for the arrival of enemy mechs. I've got a friend whose future depends on it. So sorry, but you're going to have to go. I held my breath and squeezed the trigger. The warhead billowed white smoke as it flew and hit the rear of the Fiddler Crab's railgun. However, nothing happened. I could see the Fiddler Crab's frame trembling violently as if in anger.
Misfire!
A misfire? I rolled to the side and concealed myself against the wall. I cracked open the barrel of my grenade launcher and removed the empty cartridge. Having expanded due to the heat, the shell fell into a puddle and there made a hissing sound. I had 2 cartridges left now. Along with the metallic sound of machine guns firing, material from the ceiling began falling around me. The outer walls of the building were being raked with machine gun fire. An eternity of time seemed to pass before the first fusillade died down. I sprinted and looked out the window on the other end of the room. I quickly swiveled my head and took stock of the situation. The Fiddler Crab's stance had changed. It had locked its legs and connected the wheels on the undersides of those legs to the ground. It was now entering evasive action. When I leaned forward in order to take aim again, it recommenced this machine gun barrage. The concrete around me, soaked with rain, was so riddled with holes that it was as useless as a sponge when shielding me. If I stayed here, this room itself would soon fall prey to the storm of 13mm rounds. I flattened myself and scrambled toward the stairs inside the building. The rain continued to fall. I thudded onto the sidewalk with my head bowed and strained my ears past the sound of rain falling. The high-pitched whine of a low-noise emission motor and the sound of sludge being ground under its well-maintenance wheels. Sounds that I had heard countless times before, but could by no means ever get used to hearing. My field of vision opened up. There was an abandoned commuter train standing in the middle of the two-lane railway lane. I think it was a commuter train, yeah, sorry. I concealed myself and took stock of the situation. The Fiddler Crab was moving rapidly, its four legs tracking through the mud with ease. Just when I had thought that it was going to retreat dozens of meters to the side of the quarantine wall, it suddenly altered its course. It stubbornly refused to abandon the rift in the wall, which it seemed to consider its post. It seemed that it had not recognized that I was a single infantryman, and was instead taking random evasive action against an unknown quantity of enemies. A speed of approximately 25 kilometers per hour, quite slow considering that it was running off internal power. I could tell that its sensor mounted on one side was scanning for my presence. I already knew. The moment that my first shot had failed to explode, I knew that I had lost the gamble. Had I ears that could listen in on high-frequency radio communication, I would probably be hearing the Fiddler Crab requesting backup from any nearby units right now. Then, in 10 minutes at the soonest, the one human who still breathed in this town would cease to do so. In the midst of this unending rain, the order of this dead town would once again be frozen into place, and my fate would be sealed. I was suppressing the urge to allow a crazy smile to float to my lips. Right. What I had to do still had not changed. I had to silence that Fiddler Crab as soon as possible. I then had to retrieve her and slip past the quarantine wall. As I adjusted my grip on my gun, I recalled the words of the captain who commanded my training corps. Never stop moving. Always angle in toward the defensive perimeter and charge forward without fear. Easy to say, and difficult to do. 2 AP rounds left. If at all possible, I would have to close in and first knock out a leg. Then I would have to aim for the armor top and destroy it without fail. I took a deep breath and then leapt into the rain. I ran. Having detected me, the Fiddler Crab slowed down and entered into a strafing sequence. The proximity sensors had painted me, and the linked turrets were swiveling in my direction. I sprinted forward, kicking up splashes of mud. The muzzles of the Fiddler Crab's guns spit out light. I could see 3 points of red light scanning the ground before me in lieu of tracer bullets. A line of thin water spouts kicked up before me, trapping me in a transparent cage. The moment I saw that, I changed my attack vector. After a short delay, the sound of machine gun fire rent asunder the sound of the rain falling overhead. A storm of bullets passed through the area that I stood in just a second ago. It had rectified its aim immediately. I confirmed out of the corner of my eye that the machine gun barrage had stopped for a second. I immediately changed my path even more acutely, planning on doubling back shortly thereafter. It was an old tactic, but an effective one. Because of it, I was able to give it the slip for a second time. At an edge of the buffer zone that stuck out like a bridgehead, I came upon the largely intact shell of a puffin-heavy APC. I immediately slid down and used it as cover. I would not have it to worry about being hit by even HE rounds from here. As long as I stayed closer than the minimum allowable range, I would be in no danger of being targeted by the Fiddler Crab's main armament, its LERC railgun. I quieted my heavy breathing. The shooting died down. It appeared that my opponent had enough sense to not waste ammunition needlessly. The range between the two of us was a little over 200 meters. Now the hunter would become the hunted. The Fiddler Crab began a rapid retreat. It was an established tactic to retreat and regroup in the case where one did not know the true strength of one's enemy. The gunfire resumed once again. Strange sounds echoed as the machine gun bullets ricocheted off the armor plating of the APC. It would be difficult to hit a moving target with a relatively slow-moving high-explosive round from a grenade launcher. I would have no choice but to time the motion of my opponent and lead a shot accordingly. I knew that I was becoming agitated. The blood in my body ran cold and my senses were rapidly sharpening. I suddenly wondered, was she watching? I wanted to tell her that this was what hunting was all about. A ritual of continued bloodshed that mankind had enacted over and over again since the dawn of its history in order to survive. Even though we had once extended our reach into the vastness of space, nothing had really changed. Mankind had now even created for itself game to hunt, and had equipped itself with fangs that it had not, by design, been given. The rain continued to fall. Intermittently shining tracer lights around the nearby emplacements, the Fiddler Crab continued its evasive action. I angled my grenade launcher obliquely. I pictured the position of the Fiddler Crab 5 seconds from now. I used my gun sight to target that area as if I were sticking a pushpin through it. 1, 2. I muttered as I counted to 3. I pressed the trigger. The canister drew an arc of white smoke in the air. The Fiddler Crab was in the very place I needed it to be in, as if we had choreographed our actions. I had scored a direct hit on the unarmored hip joint of its right hind leg. And after several dreadfully tense seconds, a burst of flames bloomed on the Fiddler Crab. With a thunderous roar, the Fiddler Crab came to a precarious halt as if it were going to fall forward. Its huge form inclined slowly. The ventral ammunition container fell from the Fiddler Crab like a rotten fruit with a crash and an explosion. Having lost one of its joints, the Fiddler Crab's frame groaned in a multi-layered chord. I may have let out a sound that was neither a cheer nor a scream at that point. The Fiddler Crab was severely wounded, but it wasn't dead. Its composite armor plates were trembling in anger like a proud old knight. The main battery, which had fallen greatly askew, whirred to life and started to track towards me. I watched this occur as if it were happening in a world far removed from mine. My field of vision disappeared in a storm of pure white. The thunderous sound of metal grinding assaulted my eardrums. A delayed blast shockwave scattered raindrops everywhere in a boisterous dance, similar to a storm at sea. The wind whipped about me and my nose was filled with smell of burning ozone. The next moment my body flipped into the mud as if it had been thrown by a gigantic hand. A mad buzzing filled my ears. I was blinded and couldn't move my legs. They felt as heavy as if they had been cast out of lead. I fumbled around and found that fragments of rubble had toppled over and now blanketed my thighs. I twisted my body about and somehow managed to extract myself. Unlike my body, which wouldn't move dexterously at all, my head was swarming with activity. Just now, the Fiddler Crab had aimed in my direction and fired its main cannon. The slug had veered sharply upward and had struck a building instead of me. It was an attack pattern that couldn't have possibly existed, not against a single infantryman at point-blank range. I tried to move out of the immediate vicinity. If it were running off eternal power, then it would take 25 seconds for the LERC on a Type LE to be fully recharged. If I didn't move now, then with the next shot the building would collapse on top of me. As I made the retreat, I realized I had no sensation in my right leg. It seemed like it was broken. Both my eyes and my feet now. As a dull pain began to creep up from my leg, I started to laugh. Even now, the rain still continued to fall. And now, I finally understood the situation. So that thing was broken as well. Embraced in the arms of the unending rain, that mechanized monstrosity of a spearman was still dreaming. Dreaming of the gentle city that it was charged to protect, and of the mighty enemies that it was charged to destroy. I could hear a sound reminiscent of a thundercloud's crackling, its condenser coils were charging. For my part, I could hear the sound of things underfoot and the echoes arising thereof. My eyes would not open, as if they had been run through with splinters. The hood of my waterproof cloak had been ripped off, and so I could feel fragments of concrete falling on me directly overhead. No, these were drops of rain. The rain was simply continuing to fall, as if not a single thing had changed. I had absolutely no idea where I was. And with that being said, folks, we're going to leave you cliffhanging on this note. So stay tuned for Let's Play Planetarian for Steam. Part 14 could be the final part next, I have no idea. Man, we are in a dire situation right now. And my stomach is like bottomed out already. I don't know what the hell's going to happen next. Anyway, stay tuned, folks.